Hey everyone, it's ENDYMION, and you obviously have been playing Space Marine 2 like I have. It's a blast. I've been enjoying my time with the game, and it's the rare example of a semi-live service offering that actually works, and also feels like it's worth the price tag that's attached to it. Recently, Asmongold reacted to a video made by another YouTuber named Legendary Drops. The video is about Space Marine 2, and how it represents everything we've lost over the years from AAA gaming. People are celebrating this game, and well, the game industry doesn't like that one bit, it seems. This brings us to the main topic of this video. During that reaction that Asmongold did, the CEO of Saber Interactive, which made Space Marine 2, responded in Asmongold's comments. And this has led to what can only be called a witch hunt of epic proportions that is causing the industry to show its ugly face yet again. From Park Place, Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2 developer emits games that Embracer made him want to cry with their overblown attempts at messaging or imposing morals on gamers. We should probably read what Saber CEO said. His name is Matthew Karch, and he said this via Asmongold's comments section, and I quote, "Hey man, CEO of Saber here, I love your videos. When we signed the deal to make Space Marine 2, all I wanted was a throwback game. We had the chance to work on something which by its nature was old school. I can't even comprehend many of the current games that we play these days. They are too complex and too much of an investment. We worked on Halo back in the day, and that game could be distilled down to the simplest of shooting loops, but it was entirely addicting. That is what we wanted to recapture. I hope that games like Space Marine 2 and Black Myth Wukong are the start of a reversion to a time when games were simply about fun and immersion. I spent some time as Chief Operating Officer at Embracer, and I saw games there that made me want to cry with their overblown attempts at messaging or imposing morals on gamers. We just want to do some glory kills and get the heart rate up a little. For me, that is what games should be about." End quote. As you can expect, what Matthew Karch said here has led to what can only be called a witch hunt by modern gaming news outlets and bad actors all around. Because what Karch is saying resonates with the actual players out there who, keep the lights on with their actual support. And the gaming press, well, they don't like that. Not one bit. Places like PC Gamer have also ran articles chronicling what Karch said, as did IGN too. They all seem to want answers because if Karch actually said what he did, this is problematic. But why is it exactly? Well, let's dive into it. Firstly, the most obvious part that would ruffle the feathers of these modern gaming journalists would be the part where Karch says that he is sick of games with overblown attempts at messaging or imposing morals on gamers, which, he's right by the way, 40,000%. Every game that has failed this year can fit that comment almost perfectly because it's true. We really don't want games like that. We want games that allow us to just exist and have fun without nonsense being stuffed down our throat. And I think that we can all agree that if you played Space Marine 2, that it's definitely exactly how Karch describes it. It's a game meant to up your heart rate, keep you engaged, and have a simple but fun and engaging gameplay loop, just like Halo, and offer you a good time, no nonsense required. Of course, this is not a good thing, because if your game is not overtly political or pandering something at all times, it is now a bad game. People across the industry have been getting called out for attacking Karch and trying to find out if what he was saying was actually him, and yes, we've already reached that point. So one of the people who has been vocal about this is Del Walker. They're a dev that previously worked on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which already tells us there's someone who likely champions identity politics. Del said via Twitter, "Yo, Saber Interactive, did Matthew Karch really write this, or is someone impersonating him?" Del would then double down further by stating if Saber doesn't issue a response, then that's a response. But what gets even more ridiculous is that another user, whose name is Ethan Bach, who works for Kotaku of all places, has also been looking into this as well. He would at one point tweet out about this. Update, Saber Interactive tells me it won't comment on whether a YouTube comment on Asmongold's channel complaining about games imposing morals on gamers belongs to its CEO or not. So Saber is going down the no comment route, which likely means that Matthew Karch did in fact say what he did, because if he didn't, then Saber would simply come out and say no, this was someone impersonating him. There would be no other reason to issue a no comment reply otherwise, because we all know how this works. Of course, Del Walker, the former Suicide Squad dev, would retweet Ethan Gack of Kotaku by saying, "Like I said, that's a response, but here's my question to all of these people. Why does it matter if Karch said what he said or not? What was wrong with what he said? The only reason you fools are witch hunting the guy is because, unlike Del Walker and his team at Rocksteady, which shipped a $200 million disaster that took 8 years to make in Suicide Squad, Karch and his team delivered a game that has over 2 million units sold upon launch already and has healthy player numbers even to this day. The dichotomy of what players want versus what they want to give you, it couldn't be any more different than it is right now. And I'm noticing time and time again that whenever a game is made that is actually what players want from modern gaming, these journalists, well, they never celebrate these wins for the industry. Instead, they tear them apart and try to pull them down to their level. Remember that Karch said in his comment that he wishes more games in the future resemble what Space Marine 2 and Black Myth Wukong represent, which is unbiased, straightforward, no-nonsense fun, and entertainment for all players. And it's interesting that he said Wukong, considering we all know how places like IGN and more have went out of their way for well over a year now to accuse Black Myth Wukong's devs of sexism, to the point they literally bring it up in every single article that pretty much exists about Wukong. Like, I'm not kidding you, that single IGN article, which has been disproven already time and again, has been referenced by pretty much every other gaming news outlet when it comes to Wukong. The fact they're referencing and pushing a false narrative the way that they did for so long proves that their politics are very firm and they do not support what people like Karch obviously stand for. Yet when Black Myth Wukong sold over 15 million units, these outlets reported on it, sure, but they didn't exactly celebrate it. Because Wukong wasn't a game made with their politics or messaging in mind. Meaning, it exploding to legendary levels of success was but another stain on their faces as woke gaming news outlets. So let's call this Matthew Karch Saber story the same thing as the Wukong thing is. This is, at the end of the day, a witch hunt by modern gaming journalists that are trying to silence and change the narrative to fit their ideals. That's all it ever is. They will gaslight you aplenty and say that's not actually the case. But the truth of the matter is they don't like Space Marine 2 because it doesn't represent what they want in gaming. Space Marine features male-only playable characters, which in today's Western gaming industry is a big no-no because men are bad. And it's even worse in the eyes of the journalists of today because Space Marine 2 features a straight white male character on the cover of its promotional art as well. This used to be normal in gaming, but now what Saber has done could be even seen as hate speech in the eyes of so many of these journalists and even devs. I want to remind you that what these journalists sell you is nothing but lies about 99% of the time. And they do in secret silence anyone who tries to step outside of the narrative. Don't believe me? Let's circle back to that Suicide Squad developer whose name was Del Walker. He tried to witch hunt Saber CEO as well, as you know, but why would he do this? He's just another developer, a cog in the machine if you will. His power is nothing compared to that of Matthew Karch over at Saber, but it makes sense why Del Walker would say and do what he did with this added context. Like I said, that guy worked on Suicide Squad, and we already know how that game turned out. It was like many other games this year, a modern Western gaming failure of epic proportions. They probably wish that they could sell 2 million copies like Space Marine 2 did out of the gate, but they couldn't even manage a fraction of Space Marine 2's early access numbers on Steam during their official release. Del, however, also at one point during this year attempted to go against the fabricated narrative himself, where he said this via Twitter. There's been a handful of times I've pitched black women characters that look like this. Then after 10 iterations, the concept or model comes back without a speck of the original beauty I pitched. I'm not talking about mild changes, I'm talking about pose, aura, style, softness, age, flair. I hate giving Gamergate men fuel, but it's very difficult to pitch beautiful or vain black women in games without them coming back looking like grocery store aunties. There is room for both. Del Walker confirmed in his tweet here that he has seen firsthand how these modern gaming developers at these Western studios, they refuse to allow women to ever look beautiful. And instead, like he said himself, I'm not mincing his words here, you can look this up, they literally would not allow Dell's designs to go through. And like he said, his beautiful black women designs would come back looking like grocery store aunties, those are his words. And the fact he shows an attractive black woman on one side in his post, which we can assume is similar to what Del Walker has pitched in the past, and then he shows this ugly design on the right here, which I don't even know what this is from. Like, what game is this even? Maybe it's from Starfield, like an NPC or something, but anyway, if you look at these two side by side, you can immediately tell that there's a difference in aura and sexuality aplenty between these, and there's no contest. But then what's even more interesting is after posting this on Twitter, where he admits that Western game devs have been colluding to ruin feminine beauty, Del Walker would then say this via Twitter a little bit later. After some private DMs today with other black devs, I will no longer be publicly discussing black representation in games for the foreseeable future. No more panels, articles, podcasts, nothing. This is not up for discussion, nor it is an invitation to try and change my mind. Cheers. So, it's obvious that what Del said, it ruffled more than a few feathers behind the scenes. And likely, he was being scolded and attacked for his opinions in those DMs. Likely telling him to shut up, sit down, and don't challenge the narrative. Don't give these, as he says, Gamergate men fuel to attack, but I don't consider what Del said here to be fuel at all. The man is simply telling the truth, and like the Saber CEO, what ended up happening to him as well? The same thing that always happens. You woke free game devs, you all dogpiled him, you excluded him for his comments, and then you ran a witch hunt to silence him in order to make an example out of him. And how is any of this okay? It isn't. But too many of these game devs are too scared to speak out, and unfortunately, it's the status quo for many. They know if they do, they'll be blacklisted for companies for future work. They'll look at your portfolio and go, wow, this looks great. Unfortunately, you said this on Twitter. And our human resource department, which is ran by morons, they don't agree with you, therefore, you can't work here, or it'll make it look like we support wrongthink. So what ends up happening is you have a game industry that is crumbling in real time, not only in player satisfaction, but in trust as well. We don't trust a lot of what these journalists say, or these supposed game devs that support them openly, because we know that what they support is simply whatever they're actually allowed to publicly support and nothing else. How is any of this okay? It isn't. It's eerily reminiscent of current day politics too. Say you're a liberal, it's all dandy. You're welcome, you're good. Say that Trump was right about one thing, and well, you're literally inciting violence now according to the same people who just embraced you moments before. They say that they're not in a cult, but the only people who will tell you they're not in a cult are in fact the very same people who are indeed in a cult themselves. The brainwashing is so ludicrously expansive, many of these devs refuse to see anything in any other way. Ethan Gack of Kotaku going after Saber CEO, I mean, that's nothing new. The guy works for Kotaku, a website, by the way, that is dying even quicker than we could anticipate. Smash JT posted proof based on analytics showing that Kotaku's actual site traffic, it has fallen off a cliff. And look, it was already terrible to begin with, but they somehow found a new low to reach, which is, honestly, it's kind of impressive when you think about it. But what can you expect from a game industry that has been completely altered by the moronic politics and actions of woke feminists for well over a decade now? An industry that to this day is suffering from the efforts of initiatives like Feminist Frequency, which were ran by none other than Anita Sarkeesian himself, who was kind of the patient zero and the original grifter, if you will, of the video games industry. And I mean grifter in the sense that she used her position to gaslight entire game studios and then trick them into paying her lots of money to consult on their games to ensure that female characters would meet her moronic feminist standards. The same woman who said in 2010, I am not a fan of video games, I actually had to learn a lot about video games in the process of making this. And she said this during a class directed at women and the video games industry as a whole. Of course, she's a liar because 5 years later, she would then say this. I've been playing video games since I was 5 years old. I was also fond of Nintendo and especially loved Mario and Kirby. I've been playing video games most of my life. Sure you have, Anita Sarkeesian, you are a liar and you always will be. And this grifter, by the way, is still offering her services to royally screw up your games 14 years later. And I bring her up because this is what has become the DNA, if you will, of this industry. All of these morons, these Ethan Gacks, the Del Walkers, the Mercantis, and more, they are all offshoots of their original brood mother, which is Anita Sarkeesian. And for the past 14 years, all they've done is try to enact this insane grifter's will into existence through their actions and the articles they write, and even the games that they create. You want the originator of the damage we're trying to fix? It's Anita Sarkeesian. And it pains me knowing this woman is Armenian as well, cause I'm part Armenian too, and it seems like every woman that is prominent in any way and is also Armenian are just women who are just awful human beings. I mean, Anita, of course, but also, unfortunately, the Kardashians too. Goddamn, the fact I share some level of ancestry with these people, it makes me upset just thinking about it. But like always, this is what happens when you try to make something for the players in 2024, instead of being celebrated, you're swarmed and attacked. And of course, as I was making this video, Ethan Gack, the same Kotaku guy who was leading this witch hunt, ended up writing an article about all of this and giving his opinions. The article from Kotaku is titled, "Why a Space Marine 2's Executive's YouTube Comment Became a Lightning Rod." Ethan Gack spends the entire article saying that Saber CEO's comments do nothing but reinforce the toxic masculine culture that has been plaguing video games, in Ethan Gack's opinion, of course. I'll read you some of what he said, and then we'll rev up a chainsword and split his opinion in half. He said, and I quote, "Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2, made by Saber Interactive, is a sequel to a beloved 2011 shooter and has been praised for, among other things, feeling like an old-school Xbox 360 era game, but some have marshaled that classic mystique into a rebuke of modern games that don't conform to certain views they have about who gaming is for and what it needs to be good. A week ago, YouTuber Legendary Drops posted a video called Space Marine 2 is a reminder of what we lost, in which he praised the game for its gruesome combat, beautiful presentation, and celebration of the Warhammer 40K world and lore. He tried to juxtapose it with modern games that are either live service hamster wheels or single-player experiences that feel narratively convoluted and full of bloated gameplay systems. But he also talked about the game oozing with so much masculinity that I feel like I've been in a desert for the last few years, and how it has themes nobody wants to go near anymore, like for courage and honor, for brotherhood, for the Emperor. Legendary Drops went on to praise the limited banter among the characters, calling out games that eschew simple good and evil characters and more stoic dialogue. The video didn't blow up until a few days later when YouTuber Asmongold posted a nearly hour-long reaction to it, agreeing with most of Legendary Drops' points and elaborating on some of them. The problem is not that modern games have complex characters, the problem is that their idea of a complex character is a self-indulgent loser that doesn't have any charisma, as Asmongold said at one point. There's a two-step that happens in both assessments of Space Marine 2. Each argument conflates modern gaming trends that many players find exhausting with a more recent and boutique reactionary backlash against games accused of shoehorning progressive values into their narratives. These accusations are made whenever a title dares to showcase diverse characters or tell a story that doesn't solely revolve around the straight white male that's traditionally centered in video game box art. Asmongold bringing up Dustborn, a recent action-adventure indie release about a band traveling across America, is specifically a reference to that. The game, and the team behind it, became such a target of anti-woke reactionaries online that the studio had to put out a statement. Rather than just disagreeing with the values expressed in the game, it becomes apparent for some to show that the game has financially failed and was bad because of those values. The same way some are now championing Space Marine 2 not just because it's a fun and well-designed game, but in parts claiming that it's fun and well-designed because it centers young men as the target demographic. A lot of people probably just thought, yeah, Space Marine 2 rules, I miss couch co-op and not grinding battle passes. But for a contingent of the anti-woke gaming backlash, it vindicated the idea that at least one of the scourge of modern gaming is overblown attempts at messaging or imposing morals on gamers. All of this might have been easy to shrug off if not for a highly motivated and ongoing harassment campaign against story consultants who, earlier this year became the boogeyman responsible for every person of color and pride flag that showed up in a major game. There's extra irony in a Warhammer 40K game becoming that crucible given its openly fascist world building and the fact that the owners of it have had to repeatedly remind the more toxic corners of its fan base that Warhammer is for everyone. To the degree that Space Marine 2 doesn't impose morals on the player, it's only because the politics of its universe are so obviously bleak and abhorrent that regular people know to treat them as grim dark fantasy rather than a hero's journey parable to 21st century virtue ethics. There's another hit game that's recently bucked modern blockbuster gaming trends, and it's Astrobot. There are no daily quests, crafting systems, or XP grind in that either, just a crisp and highly refined mashup of Super Mario Odyssey and Crash Bandicoot Collectathon platform. Weirdly, no one seems to be obsessed with whether the cute little robot at the center of the game is a paragon of masculinity or secretly a vehicle for transmitting woke propaganda, end quote. Holy crap, that was a lot to read, but can we just start with that ending part first? Why the hell are you bringing up Astrobot? It's the least controversial game this year. It's just a fun celebration of PlayStation games with a cute little robot guy. I love the game. I 100%ed it earlier this week, and nobody's debating whether Astrobot is woke. These journalists are just brain rotted, dude. Beyond this, claiming that Gamergate is a harassment campaign is rich considering these journalists have done nothing but ruin gaming with their constant, incessant articles that offer nothing but proving why Gamergate needed to exist in the first place. They also bring up Sweet Baby, but they don't name it that way. They just say they're a consulting company that were labeled Boogeyman for diversity. And oh really now, it's funny how I keep dismantling Sweet Baby Inc.'s involvement in everything that they do on this channel, yet these journalists never admit how wrong they are. Oh, Sweet Baby doesn't have any power in making things happen, you're crazy, especially when Del Walker, yet again of Suicide Squad, said this via Twitter. After 11 years in this industry, I finally did it, a black character on the front cover of a AAA game, dreams come true, y'all. He means Deadshot being in Suicide Squad, and oh look, it's Kim Belair, the co-founder of Sweet Baby Inc., personally commenting, and then Del Walker saying, so glad you were present to help mold his character, Kim, with a heart emoji. Aw. Also, shout out to Sile, by the way, for all of these amazing receipts. That dude literally has dirt on everybody to some degree. Any of these game devs could say something, and Sile can and will emerge from the shadows like the goddamn Grim Reaper with everything they've ever said detailing how they're actually lying. So shout out to Sile, follow him on Twitter and YouTube. Dude is a repository of gotchas in the best way possible. He made this one and the other Del Walker post I showed earlier as well. Also in Sile's gotcha post on Del Walker, he shows how these devs, they can't fathom when other devs do really well. Like when Del said, my gut is telling me Pal World was made nefariously, I just have no proof, just dev intuition. Then someone replies, it does feel like that, doesn't it? And Del says, making a game is just so difficult. They're cheating somehow, I just can't pinpoint how. And then he never followed this up and had zero proof, and it just turned out that Pal World's devs actually just knew how to make a fun game. And his team couldn't, and that's why Pal World sold over 10 million units and Suicide Squad has led to layoffs. Why I'm showing you all of this and placing it up against Ethan Gack's article at Kotaku is because he's trying to paint the narrative that everything his side advocates for is right and Gamergate and the players are actually wrong, when in fact, it's the opposite. No sensible games journalist would go after Saber CEO for his comments. You guys should be celebrating that Saber CEO's decisions when it came to making Space Marine 2 led to the devs there getting gainful employment and shipping a game that was well received by fans. There should be no negativity surrounding this game when it comes to what has happened here. But the fact that you've all gone to the point where what Saber CEO has said is somehow evil or wrong, it proves how backward this industry really is. Kotaku is the last place we should be listening to when it comes to good takes on the internet. They're rightfully so seen as the laughingstock of the game industry and online space for good reason. They're a horrific website that has long outlived their usefulness, and they're the rare case of a website having zero credibility when it comes to their own articles. The day that Kotaku dies, it will be a day that players will celebrate, and then they'll blame right-wing players as the reason that they failed. But all that will prove yet again, like I said in my previous video, which is that if the modern audience of magical liberal gamers out there supposedly exists, then why aren't they supporting you? Could it be that you're lying and these so-called liberal gamers just don't exist nearly as much as you like to think they do, or you're just lying through your teeth? It's both actually this time, by the way. Maybe get all your game dev friends to run every computer in their offices to just scroll Kotaku articles all day so you can survive. Because based on those analytics I showed previously, Kotaku's revenue is in the dump alongside their credibility. And none of it is anyone's fault but their own, but this is where we're at, fellas, right now. These journalists are targeting people for wrong thing. They really don't like that you have your own mind, and they want to sacrifice this Saber CEO simply because of what? He made a good game that people like, and he's not wrong saying that his time in Embracer showed him the absolute state of the industry either. He saw firsthand how poorly these things can do, and the eventual success of Space Marine 2, it just proves that Saber CEO is simply reacting to an industry that is hungry for certain kinds of content. And you can be mad all you want and what he made goes against your agenda and blah blah blah, but in reality, what Matthew Karch and Saber have created has resonated. Also, big update, but it turns out that Matthew Karch, the Saber CEO, has actually confirmed that he did in fact say what he said. So on LinkedIn, when asked, Karch replied with, "Whoever wrote that seems pretty sharp." Yeah, this guy's having a laugh and we love to see it. Good for him for confirming it and sticking by his guns. But ultimately, they just don't want these sorts of games to exist because they go against the industry norm. Which is pathetic and sad considering all Space Marine 2 really is a cool co-op third-person hack-and-slash game with shooter elements. It's not exactly reinventing the wheel here, but it's troubling that for an industry that is falling apart the way that it is, that they are never willing to uplift the games that actually can save them from their own oblivion. They should be celebrating this monumental win, but instead they're pulling it down and trying to scrap it for parts. The response to Saber CEO and Space Marine 2 here should tell you that there is definitely a cult-like echo chamber that is ruling the games industry with an iron fist, that is working to crush any and all ideas or momentum that goes against what they think. But doing what they're doing here is not justified, and Saber CEO has proved that it's a very big club, and we are definitely not all allowed in it. But that's where we're at right now. Do you agree with Saber CEO? What about the witch hunt? Is it justified or not? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, subscribing and such. Thanks to my patrons and members. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Let's make gaming great again, and I'll see you soon.